So this furniture company is making tables and chairs, and I'm just going to use capital T for table and capital C for chairs. So we need to keep track of the tables and also keep track of the chairs. Also, there's the hours of labor. So hours of labor to assemble it, and then hours to do the finish work. Okay, so there's several things to keep track of. So I'm going to make a column for the table information and then a column for the chair information. And just make a little table like this. And then also there is the labor to assemble it. And then there's also the finish work. So I need a couple of rows like this. All right, now I'm going to erase this stuff so that I can reread the question. So a table requires 8 hours of labor. So for every single table, it requires 8 hours of labor. So for however many tables, you have to multiply each one by 8 to get the total amount of hours. And for the finish work, it takes 2 hours. So for every table, it takes 2 hours. Now, what about the chairs? So a chair requires 2 hours for assembly. So each chair requires 2 hours. And 1 hour of finish work. So 1 times C goes here. All right, so that is putting all of the information from the first couple of sentences. Then the maximum number of hours for labor is $400 per day, 400 hours per day. So obviously they have many employees working in total because nobody's going to be able to work just by themselves 400 hours. But that's basically saying that for the labor in total, this has to be less than or equal to 400. And for the maximum hours for finishing, that's 120. So this finishing row has to be less than or equal to 120. So basically we have our two inequalities. One says when you take 8t plus 2c for the labor, that has to be less than or equal to 400. Oops, that's not a 4. 400. And then the bottom row says 2t plus 1 times c, or I guess I could just put c for that. Then that has to be less than or equal to 120. Okay, now I need to graph this. So first I'm going to take the 8t plus 2c and set it equal to 400 and find out what kind of line that makes. So I'll just make a little table and say, well, if I plug in 0 for t, that means this would be gone. And then 2c equals 400. So if you divide by 2, c equals 200. Next, if I were to substitute a 0 for c, this would be gone. And then divide both sides by 8. And 400 divided by 8 is going to be 50. All right. Then I could start graphing that information. So basically I use t first, so that would be like the x-axis. I use c second, so that would be like the y-axis. And this one says when t equals 0, c equals 200. So there's one point. And then the other point would be if t equals 50, then c equals 0. And then just make a nice straight line connecting those two. All right, then for the other equation, so this one right here. So just make it an equation first of all, 2t plus c, and then set it equal to 120. And again, make a little table of values. And it's easiest if you just say, well, what if t equals 0? Because then this would be gone, and then it would just say c equals 120. And then go back and say, well, what if you put c equal to 0, which means this would be gone, and then divide both sides by 2, so 120 divided by 2 is 60. All right, then graph those points, and I'm going to use blue for that one. So the first one says if t equals 0, then c equals 120. So c 120 would be approximately right here. And then for the next one, it says when t equals 60, then c equals 0. And then just connect those two with a nice straight line. And then the good news is we're almost done. So both of these have a less than or equal, which means you're shading under the line. And if you have to shade under the line for both of them, I'll just use pink. If you have to shade under the line for both of them, that means that it's this region in here. So this nice, beautiful pink region right here. And then what we need to do is test all of the vertices. So one of them would be 0, 0. In other words, the company makes 0 tables and 0 chairs because they went out of business. There would also be this vertex where the 120 is. So that would be 0, 120. And then there would be this one where the 50 is, which would be 50, 0. So basically, one of them is saying they don't make anything, so that means they went out of business. This one means they make 50 tables and do not make any chairs. This one says make 0 tables and make 200 chairs. And then you're right, there is one other vertex. That's right here. So then we need to find out where that point is. So for that, we basically could just go back to the two equations that I had over here on the left and then find out where they intersect. So what I could do is on the bottom equation, I could solve for c, so just subtract 2t, so that's going to be 120 minus 2t, and then take that and substitute it into that equation. So that equation would look like 8t plus 2 times, and then replace c with 120 minus 2t, and then that equals 400. So if you distribute the 2, we'll have 8t plus 240 minus 4t, and then it equals 400. So an 8t minus 4t, that's going to be 4t. And then if you subtract 240 from both sides, then 400 minus 240 is going to be 160. And then I just need a little more space. Hold on. I just need a little more space. Let me move that down. Okay, so then if you divide both sides by 4, then t is equal to 40. So once t is equal to 40, we can substitute that in here and find out what does c equal. So that's going to be a 120 minus 80, so that's 40. So where I got the question marks, that should actually be 40, 40. So according to the math, they would be making 40 tables and 40 chairs, which is sort of a strange thing in reality because that means each table only has one chair. I guess for people that live alone, I don't know. All right, then do we finish? So find the graph and the limits for the number of tables and chairs that can be produced per day. I thought I would have asked which one gives you, okay, so I was thinking of another problem where you actually solve and find out how would they make the most money. So that's all I asked for this one. So that's basically the limits. So one would be that they have 0 tables and 120 chairs. Another one would be 40 tables and 40 chairs. And then another would be that they're out of business, 0 tables and 0 chairs. And then another one would be 50 tables and 0 chairs. All right, so that's the end of this one.